This is a tutorial for how to use the TI-84 graphing calculator to solve systems of equations and to solve polynomials. I have one of each type of problem over here on the left side of the screen. So we'll start with the system of equations. Notice in that system, both equations are written in standard form with both variables on the left side of the equal sign and any constants on the right side. And they both have to have the same variable written in corresponding locations. So any x's should be listed first and y second, or whatever the variables are that you're using, they need to be aligned with each other. This is the same format we often use for solving equations using elimination, but here we're going to let the calculator do the work for us. So at this point, we hit the button called Apps in the calculator. You can see it turn red here on the screen. You're going to arrow down to get to Polysimult 2. It may be option 9 on your calculator, but either way, you can arrow down and get to it, hit enter, press any key to go to the next screen. And we're going to use the simultaneous equation solver when we're solving simultaneous equations, systems of equations. So arrow down to 2, hit enter. We have 2 equations, so highlight 2 and hit enter if it's not already highlighted. And we have 2 unknowns, an x and a y, 2 variables that we are trying to identify. You can solve for as many unknowns as you have equations, so 4 equations with 4 unknowns or 3 equations with 3 unknowns. But here we have 2 equations and 2 unknowns. Here, you can decide if you want your answers as fractions or decimals. This isn't too important, but you can put decimals. The rest of it you can basically ignore for now. Now to get to the next screen, we hit the graph button below that next tab and hit enter. You can see this gives you a matrix. Yours is probably blank, but this is a coefficient matrix where you put the coefficient of the first variable in the first upper left spot. So we have x has a coefficient of 3, so you type a 3 in that top left corner. Type 3 and hit enter to go to the next space. It brings you over to the y coefficient spot, which is 11. Hit enter. Then on the other side of that black line is where you put the constant, or what's on the other side of the equal side. So we write 16. Now we go to the bottom equation. 2 is the coefficient of x. Y doesn't have a coefficient, so it's an understood 1. And because it's minus in front of the y, then it's negative 1. And then 0 is the constant. And now we get to solve. So hit the graph button to access the solve tab. And you can see this gives a solution. x1 is 0.64 and x2 is 1.28. Those x1 and x2, that just stands for the 2 variables that you used. So since our first variable was x, then we would say, I'm going to write over here on the screen, that x equals 0.64 and y equals 1.28. I often ask my students to write that as an ordered pair. X comma y, so 0.64 comma 1.28 is another way to write that solution. Okay, a couple of notes here. You can click this FD button to switch back and forth between fractions and decimals, so it will convert it to a fraction for you if you want, and if it's possible. So I'm going to hit that graph button to do that, and there you can see fractional answers. And then you can also edit or make changes if you realized you made a mistake there by hitting the System tab or Zoom. You can go back into the matrix and make changes, and then you can solve again. You can change the mode if you realize you're on a different mode. And that's that. So I'm going to leave this screen by hitting second quit. You have to do it again, second quit. And now I'm back to my main home screen. And that's how you solve simultaneous equations. To solve quadratics or any type of polynomial, you need to make sure that your polynomial is in standard form, and what that means is all terms on one side of the equal sign, and it has to be set equal to 0. Combine all like terms and write your variables in descending exponent order. So your highest exponent is listed first, and then your next highest, and then your next highest, and so on. Once you have it set up correctly, we're going to go back to the Apps button and back to Polysimul 2. Hit enter, enter again, and then we're going to use the polynomial root finder. The order is just the degree of your polynomial, which is the highest exponent. In this case, our highest exponent is 2, so it's a second order. And everything else can stay where it is: real, decimal, normal, floating, and degree. And then go to the next button. And here we type in the coefficients of those terms in descending, in their variables descending order. So the coefficient of the x squared term is 4. The coefficient of the x term, the linear term, is, since it's minus 13, it's negative 13. And the constant term, that a0 is the constant term, and that is negative 1, since the constant is minus 1. Type all those in, hit the solve button, and it gives you 2 answers. This time x1 and x2 both are x values, because quadratics often have 2 answers. So our answers are that x could be 3.33 or negative 0.0752. So those are our 2 answers, and they're not an ordered pair because they're not an x and y. They're just 2 possibilities for x. You can, again, solve higher order if you had a cubic polynomial or a quartic. You just make those changes on that mode screen right there. If you want to, let me go back to solve. You can also edit this if we want to change the coefficients. We're like, oh, I forgot the negative or something. You can just access the coefficients by hitting that zoom button, and you can make your changes there. Or you can clear it if you want to just start fresh. But that's it. You've gotten your answers, and that's how to use the calculator to do that kind of solving for you.